food for her family and portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arm to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring praise at the city gate. So I don't have a specific teaching for that this morning. The goal of the morning is this: in light of it being Mother's Day, a holiday recognized. I don't know if is it considered a holiday or just a day, but anyway, to say that to me it's twofold: to give mothers the honor that they're due, and there being a good reason for wanting to do that, because so often the work that a mother does goes completely and falls completely under the radar. But also the second reason to give our gratitude to God for providing us with that kind of love. And again, I know there's 100 different stories in here, about what your mother has particularly done. Sometimes that type of love hasn't always found its place in your direct biological mother. And I think about, foster children, and that's definitely something to think about. But God has placed that motherly love within women, all over, and most of us have seen that from someone in our lives, and so to give thanks that God has provided that when He has, and to give thanks that is so natural in so many ways for women. I see it in Sarah, and I see how she, like we described to the kids, has willingly sacrificed. And yes, it's not always joyful, especially at night when you want to sleep and JJ needs care or a baby needs care. But there is a willingness and an eagerness to care for that little baby. And God, I think, has wired women in a way that is pretty extraordinary, and I'm very thankful for that. So, first things first, have you taken a moment to thank God for your mother today, or what He's shown you? And I have. I've taken a moment to thank for my grandmothers and Sarah, but probably not enough. So you're going to have 2 minutes here, or a minute. We're going to just give it to you to say, thank God for your mother, even in her failings. Thank God for her, because she did give you life, even in her failings. And God did say, honor your mother and father, and He didn't say because they're righteous. So keep that in mind as well. So we're going to take a moment to just thank God first, and then we're going to take a moment to hear what you have to say about motherhood, and we'll go into that next. So a minute of silence, just your chance, because I'm not in the busyness, you may not get this chance any other time. Thank God. Keep doing that today, every chance you get. Just give gratitude to God. It is so difficult to be angry or think about what hasn't happened in your life, or the failings of you as a mother, or your mothers or grandmothers, when we are grateful. So keep that gratitude for everything. Another thing I wanted to be sure to come through, and as we think about those scriptures and the way God holds up mothers for honor consistently in Scripture, through the command of the original 10 Commandments coming from Moses, that He included the honoring of your parents, both father and mother, says something about the nature of parenthood and motherhood, because even in somebody who is penning it from a very patriarchal society, the mother is included. Obviously, it's not just the father. And then for that to be reemphasized by Paul to the church in Ephesians, to say, hey, kids, this is the only commandment with a promise, that you will have long life. Take it seriously, that this is important. But in motherhood, and I see it firsthand with Sarah, I'm not a mother, and so I feel very unqualified to even be speaking, but I wanted to encourage you this morning because I know it is a struggle, and I have failed to recognize the sacrifice Sarah has made for her children, for our children. And I know there's been times in your life where you feel like, I have given till I am done giving, and no one has even noticed, because the ones I'm giving to only come back and ask for more. And they only come, like, I've sacrificed, and it's only, why didn't you do this for me? But now I want this. And, there's more. I want more. I want more. And so the reward of a mother often sacrificing and laying down her life is often met with a demand for more instead of the reward of praise or thankfulness. So on behalf of the fathers in the room, on behalf of brothers and sons, and I know I can speak, and probably all of us would get there too, but thank you so much, mothers, and know that even in the absence of praise or a direct reward, that what you have done and are doing is of the utmost importance. That in those moments where you're just grinding it out, and it seems like your house has turned into a closet and you can't get, and everything is just, like what you're doing is so meaningful. And you think about who has the ear of their children more than their mother. Who has the influence, because who is spending the most hours with these kids more than their mother? Very often it is you, Mom. And when I say mom, I don't want grandmothers in the room to forsake saying, okay, that's nice for them. This also applies to you. Because, yes, I understand like grandparenthood is different. I don't understand it yet and say, hey, I have the ability. Really, I think grandparents will figure out there's some things that are very important and other things that parents are like, no, too much fruit snacks, get it out. They're like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter all that much. But even if grandparents aren't worried about the little things, grandparents, you should absolutely be concerned, and grandmothers, about the big things. So you still are a mother, even though your direct motherhood has since matured. So in all of that, to all of you mothers, keep up the good fight. Keep it up, because it is working. When you do it out of that heart of unconditional love that God showed us, it is absolutely working. And as we talked about Satan last week, chirping in your ear, deceiving you, he's saying to you, no one sees what you're doing. And even what you're doing, look at your kids. It doesn't matter. They're turning into hooligans anyway. Why do you try so hard? And I don't think I'm alone in seeing that happen to moms and what Sarah and I have talked about. Like, I know Satan has her ear and saying, like, I'm exhausted. I see no fruit from this. That is a lie. And the stronger you hear him tell that to you, the more you can probably be convinced what you are doing is absolutely working. And it's probably, we think of spiritual battles and we think of men in armor wielding their swords and their shields. But wouldn't it make sense for Satan to go after the most vulnerable? He says, who are the most vulnerable? Well, it's those who are setting the table before them of how they're going to live their life. And who is setting that table before them? Oh, it's their mother and father. In particular, the mother's spending a lot of time for them. So if I can get after the mothers and let them be reassured that what they're doing doesn't matter, then I've won the hearts of the children to say, no, there's no reason to fight the good fight of faith. So again, going back to the Satan and what we talked about last week, I really feel like he has a special attack for the mothers in the room because of the importance of the fight, the spiritual health of our children. So take that seriously. So in all of that, and in the scripture we read this morning, I want to open it up, and we've done this in the past. And we've done in the past with the light of, let's say how did your mother impact you? What were you thankful about for your mother? But I also want to open it up broader than that. Maybe you have some encouragement to mothers in the room. You say, hey, I do want to tell you to keep fighting. Or you have some advice. Or you say, maybe you stand up and say, I need help, please. Or even, it's not just for mother, like sons and fathers, for you to speak into what that motherhood has looked like in your life and what you believe God has purposed our mothers for. So the floor is open. Anybody who has some words to speak into that, I'd love to hear that, because when you guys talk, it's usually more powerful than when you're just listening. So anybody who has anything as we've set the stage for Mother's Day. And I will bring this to you just to make sure everybody can hear.
As you know, I get a little emotional, like Teresa. So I probably will. First, my thoughts on grandmotherhood. There's times I didn't think I was a very good mother. So at times, that's what grandmothers are all about. They can make up for the mistakes that they made as a mother. And I think that's a glorious thing. I love being a grandmother. Also, I'm not intending to embarrass anybody, but my mother was, really good and brought me to know the Lord. But my best friend, a good mother, is Nancy Hare. I didn't want to do this. But she's taught me so much. And thank you. And I hope that everybody can see what a good mother she is. All right, I'm done.
Thanks. Anybody else? Arletta, and then we'll go over here to Vicki.
My parents were both raised by women who had no mothers because their mothers died when they were babies. And I am, could you hear any of what I said? But I am so in awe at this stage of how those grandmothers of mine who had no mothers, how they did it, how they did it all, how they worked so hard and taught their kids so well, how they did that without a mother when they were just grew up living with first one person and then another. And I think about my mom raising 12 of us, and how in the world she did all that, and what a wonderful witness she was in helping us to know God and to have our values. And I can't speak more because she and to be unselfish and to be giving and all the things that I think of how hard all of them worked, and their life was so different than what we have now, and they just made our childhood and our adulthood even to be happy and to be focused on God and to be the kind of people that we should be.
I wish I could say I had a godly mother, but I did not. She was a good mom. We never went hungry, and we always had a home, and we were never cold or without clothing or anything of that nature. But she was not a godly woman. There have been people in my life, primarily boyfriends' mothers, that were godly church women that I went to church with them and learned things, and they taught me, and I love them to this day. They always get Mother's Day cards. Unfortunately, one of them is no longer with us. But fortunately, there were times that I could witness to my mother, and she would listen. There were times when she would not listen. But for any mothers, young mothers, that are going through that type of relationship with your mom, just know that when they're gone, all of that goes away. It doesn't matter anymore. I was very fortunate because Mother got to spend about her last year with us, and she was a completely different person. I am very, very thankful for that, and thankful that my husband loved me enough and my mother enough to help me take care of her.
Thank you, Vicki. And I don't want to come up here when I was speaking and overemphasize the grand picture of a mother, when I know we've all seen brokenness, whether it's our lives or somebody we know, and God has a power to redeem the most broken mothers of all. And even for the mothers in this room, is I blew it, or I think I blew it, or Satan told me I blew it. Like, that's not too late. Christ redeems anything. So, and that's a good story of hope. Thank you.
Well, my mother's in the nursing home now. She's 100 years old. She's out of her house and dependent on everyone else. But every time I go to visit her, which is 2 or 3 times a week, she always says that I'm fine. You need to be with your family.
Thanks, John.
And Wake, you kind of alluded to it about forgiveness. And I think about, hateful things I might have said to my mom, but she forgot all about them. And so that God forgives us in our ugliness. And so we do need to ask for forgiveness.
It just entered my mind sitting here that I grew up in this church, and I've always remembered that we had mothers in this church that went overboard to keep us kids interested. They done extra things with us. I don't know. I just wanted to touch upon that I just remembered that growing up as a child myself, what our mothers of this church done for us.
Thanks, Marty.
But it's being a mother is hard, but it's helpful that the men of the church, or the men, I just want to give, I know it's not Father's Day, but to thank the men to make mothers, our job is easier because of the support that the men give us. And so I do thank the men of the church for that. So anyway.
Thanks, Brenda.
I really don't know if I need this or not. My wife's always telling me to be quiet. So, my mom was a nurse for over 40 years, and all of my growing up years, she worked nights. And so when I got into the 3rd grade, they started Little League football. And I love sports. So without asking, I signed up. And I didn't have a clue how I was going to get to practice or any of the logistics. I just signed up because I wanted to play football. And so I never forget the day I went home. I got off the bus and I was so excited, and I ran in the house. And by the time I would get home, my mom would be up. She slept. They would come home and get me off to school, and then they would go to bed, because my dad worked nights too. So I came in and I said, Mom, I signed up for football. And I didn't have a clue because I didn't have any thought of how it would affect her and her life. And so the first question was, well, how are you going to get back and forth to practice? And I said, oops. Didn't think about that. She said, that's all right. She said, if you make the commitment to play, I'll make sure that you get there. So we would go and practice, and we would walk about a mile to a grocery store. And when we got done, and I'd call my mom, and she would come pick me up, and sometimes a couple of my friends that lived in the neighborhood. I can't think of how many practices. I mean, think about it, from 3rd grade on, all the way through until I started to drive. Well, then I decided I wanted to play college football. And she said, okay, I don't know how you're going to do that. Teresa, you can relate to this. I don't know how you're going to get to college, but if you get to college, I'll be there. She never missed the game. So from that, I learned a whole lot about commitment and support. Bless her heart.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig.
Oh, he's going to wake up. Dovetailing off of what Craig was just saying, I think you all know about 3 weeks ago our lives took a radical change, and I'm looking at things that we took for granted being able to do that now there's just no way. 17 years ago our lives were like they are today, but they've taken a big change. And just, I was reminded of Philippians 2 that talks about, Jesus giving up all the rights, the throne, the kingdom of heaven to come and minister to us, kind of for no thanks. And that is really what our moms do every day. And they give up all their own interests and really set them on the shelf. I mean, it's just day-to-day attending to kids, not for a lot of thanks. And I appreciate that in my wife and in my mom.
I guess I would second what Dad said, that being an adult and having younger siblings, I didn't remember all that it took to have younger siblings or to be a 6-year-old or a 1-year-old, and it makes me really appreciate everything that Mom invested in us and taking care of us. And I can't imagine how she homeschooled me with Caleb being Brendan's age, Skylar's age.
Thanks, guys.
When it's open mic morning at church, I'm going to have to talk.
We have to be out by
You have an hour.
An hour. We're good. This is my mama. She flew in from California to be at my graduation. And she, when I was born, when she was 16, she wanted nothing more than me. I wasn't an accident. But she couldn't keep me. She wanted to, but she couldn't. And so she made the ultimate sacrifice of herself for me, so that I could have this life, so that I could graduate from college and be married to a wonderful man and have beautiful, healthy children. And I just want to thank you. And I want to tell you that you did the right thing. That I appreciate your sacrifice, and I know that it almost killed you. But this is why you did it, to give me this life, and I thank you. Okay? And I don't want you to carry heartache or guilt with you over it, okay? I know. You didn't fail. I know. So I just want to say thank you. And I know I've said it before, but in this place and with these people who, you know, and talking about mothers. And I had other mothers that in my life that God placed in my life to step in and be the mothers that I needed them to be for certain other times in my life. And even now, I have other people that, you know, God has filled the gaps where He's needed to, and I'm eternally grateful for the sacrifice of every mother and every woman that I have had in my life. So. Less than 5 minutes.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah. Yes, Grandma.
Just a moment. Like Marty, I grew up in this church as a child. Was a teenager in this church. Went away for a few years, as we do when we get to that age. But came back with my own babies. They grew up in this church. And now I have the privilege of seeing children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And it's such a privilege. And motherhood, I think, is probably at least one of the hardest things you'll ever do. And yet it's the most rewarding. And you young mothers, I'm amazed at the young mothers we have in this church who are able to get their children up and ready and come and teach. And some of them are downstairs right now teaching the children so that we can enjoy a worship service. So you're doing something so worthwhile. Don't be weary, don't give up. But I admire you all so very much. And Trudy, thank you for the kind words. We've loved Trudy all her life. She was my daughter's best friend in high school before she became something more to our son. So she's always been a part of our family, and we love her.
Seems to me she was always scheming to get into your family. Don't want to shut it off before everybody's had a chance who wants to speak.
What Teresa said really kind of made me think, because I had a godly mother who taught me about the Lord and just has blessed my life in many ways, but she wasn't perfect either. And but God has ways of meeting us wherever, and He does make us as a body a family. We have never lived, even growing up, we never lived close to extended family, and so the church was always our family. And in Isaiah, it says, God says He puts the singles in families, and He really intends for the church to meet that need, because as biological parents, none of us are perfect. None of us can meet all those needs, and so as a body of Christ, we can meet that, and God has purposes to meet us wherever we need it, because He makes us a body.
I think that humility speaks volumes, that we're always so eager, and especially in today's age, when we talked about this in a small group where we have Facebook and social media, where others are able to say, "Ooh, look at me! I got my kids dressed up. We went to the zoo. I made them picnic." Well, and all these things, like, oh, I didn't do that as a mother. And so again, I think the attacks are on to say you're not good enough, you're not doing it right, but to say the humility when you're marked by saying, I know I'm not getting it right. I know I will fail. I've failed thousands of times, and I will fail thousands of times more as mothers, as fathers, as Christians. However, in that humility to come to the place that that's okay if we can fall back on the grace and mercy of Christ. And that, to me, that's the only thing that allows us to be humble and honest and get at some of these things and lead to the point where someday somebody's testifying to say, this eternally changed everything. Something my mom did, or laid the framework for, it eternally changed everything. And it was so worth it, even though there was so much pain. It was so worth it. So, anybody else?
One regret as a mother, I felt like, I was a decent mother. But I've told my kids that they're growing up, I watched some of these young mothers with all of their patience And my patience ran thin sometimes. I really think about, I've always regretted not having more patience when my kids were growing up.
You don't suppose you're the only mother?
But I can remember one mother that was a friend of mine that her little boys, I can remember seeing her take him to the bathroom one day, and he sat there on the stool, and she just leaned down beside him and visited with him while he sat there, and there were people there. There was a whole group, and I was telling mine, perhaps we can get back out here. It was, but I just always wished I'd had more patience.
Yeah. And anybody disagree with that? Not with Marty in particular, but yeah.
I have to tell this story that my mother, she had a washing machine that had those old double tubs in it thing, and there was a little chain that put the stopper in this thing, and one of my brothers came in, and she had the tubs full of water, and he pulled the plug, and she said, "David, honey, put the plug back in." I would have been screaming my head off, and she just says, "David, honey, put the plug back in." She had to carry all that water, so.
I also, in those frames too, because often we're saying, we have failed, or mothers say, I haven't been patient enough, I haven't done this enough. But on the flip side of that as well, if you can agree on one thing, that you are seeking Christ and that you are rooted in Him, then you actually can be very confident. And not only that, you can be so confident that you can say to other mothers, like, look, I do understand a few things about this motherhood deal. I think often we shy away, we're like, oh, they're doing their own thing. But if you are confident and you're seeking Christ and seeking to be a mother in Christ, then you can lead other mothers, because God knows other mothers need some leadership as well. And then that goes to guys and saying, hey, I think a big problem is our guys haven't stepped up to lead, to set the framework for mothers to do and fulfill the purpose God's calling them to when they're trying to do other things that God has intended for men. And that goes back to some Ephesians teaching when we looked at the roles of wives and husbands as well. So, mothers, be encouraged, because you hear these stories, and some of the people not even here to hear them, who were the direct influence of them. Those are your stories that are being written right now on the hearts of kids who don't have the words to explain it yet, mostly, but they are being written as you plug and sacrifice and try and cry and say, God, why? This is the fruit, and this is the fight. And there is an evil one who seeks to remind you of all that is not going well, and that there's no purpose in it, and that's a lie. So, on behalf of Fillmore Christian, thank you, mothers. There are potted plants, I believe, in the back here that any mother can take, and then after we're sure all mothers can take them, then it's open to anyone who's had a mother. So any last words, a final chance before we wrap up? I appreciate you guys.
I love my mom very much. For the years, my mother has had many faces, aunts, great aunts, stepmoms, and for that I am very blessed.
That's awesome. It's not that motherly love did not just rest solely in a biological mother. It's an important reminder. Thank you guys for the openness, the honesty. Keep sharing these stories throughout today with your families as you eat with each other. It's worth it. With that, let's sing our choral benediction. May the Lord, mighty God,